Bonjour everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel, Françoise the Guiding Star. So we begin the month of May with this full moon in Scorpio occurring between May 1st and May 2nd, exactly for us in Australia at 3:22 a.m. on the 2nd of May, Brisbane time, and she's sitting at 11 degrees 20 minutes of Scorpion. So this is an important moment for everyone to observe in your birth chart in which house this 11 degree of Scorpion is located, because that is where a major truth could be revealed. So full moon is always an opposition. The sun and the moon face each other, and this confrontation illuminates, reveals, and amplifies emotions, bringing things to light, meaning that an energy, something that was unconscious, will be highlighted, rise to the surface, put in the spotlight to be recognized for what it is. But with Scorpion, what becomes visible is not definitely comfortable. These are more intense, deep emotions, as if something is surfacing unexpectedly, not necessarily something you try to understand right away, but rather something you feel. And this full moon, the Taurus Scorpion axis is activated at this full moon, and there's a tension between what stabilizes and what transforms. And faced with this, there can be two movements. One part of you seeks to remain stable, not to move too much, which is Taurus. And the other part of you senses that something is changing, even if it is not yet clear, which is Scorpion. Scorpion is a water sign, a fixed sign, and the complementary polarity of Taurus. And it is a truly emotional, very intense energy. Of the three water signs, Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpion, he is the most intense, perhaps even the deepest and most lucid sign. It is in a way the light hidden at the bottom of the swamp. With Scorpion, we don't take the easy way out. We go for the truth. And this full moon in particular activates the desire to understand deeply, to go beyond appearances, and above all, to have the courage to face what has remained in the shadows. So this full moon is a moon of truth, as if something you already felt will become obvious or impossible to ignore. And so here, this truth that you felt, that you sense, well, in Scorpion, it can be confronting, but in any case, it can be also profoundly liberating. This full moon will strongly activate also the virtues of Scorpion. That is to say, your intuition, your emotional sensitivity, and perhaps even your more subtle perceptions. And you're invited to see differently. That is to say, not with your eyes, of course, but truly with your feelings, your subtle perceptions, and to trust what emerges internally. And remember, Scorpion truly demands this essential thing: honesty. Emotional, psychic, and mental honesty. That is to say, not minimizing what happens, not trying to embellish it, not avoiding it, not skirting around it, but recognizing what is true within you in order to transform it. Because Scorpion is also the sign of transformation. Taurus brings an energy exactly opposite to that of Scorpion, an energy of stabilization, simplicity, and grounding. It is an archetype, and I remind you that we all have the energy of Taurus within us, because the 12 signs of the zodiac constitute our psyche. There are 12 facets of ourselves. We are all affected by each of the signs. And so, what does Taurus do for each of us? It is an energy that helps us return to the essentials, to source emotional intensity by finding, for example, concrete solutions to things. Taurus is an earth sign. It likes to have its feet firmly planted on the ground. It has good down-to-earth common sense. It takes its time. It is persevering. In opposite, Scorpion plunges deep. We are in water here, but not the fresh water of Cancer's rivers, nor the deep, vast waters of Pisces. No, we are in the water of rock pools, of swamps. This water you see, which may be clear on the surface, but as soon as you dip a toe, a hand, a foot in, your perceptions is blurred by the depths, by the mud, by the silt, by the what is lying hidden at the bottom of this water. And Scorpion helps you precisely to go into these depths. The Taurus-Scorpion axis is also the financial, material axis. Taurus represents personal resources, what you own, your personal values, what you believe in, what you value, your self-worth. It is all about finance, money, but also symbolic value. And so opposite Scorpion represent what you share, what you owe, and then financial or energetic commitments to others. So you see, this full moon has a principle of illumination and balancing between Taurus-Scorpion energies. This full moon can therefore lead us to important realizations about our financial management, our investments, or anything that needs to be rebalanced on a psychic, emotional, and mental level. These two signs, Taurus-Scorpion, are fixed. They hold tight. They persist. They go all the way. The full moon on this axis invites you to explore what you hold most precious within you and to discern what deserves to be kept from what deserves to be transmuted. Not torn away, but transformed, like the chrysalis dissolving, so that the butterfly may exist. And Scorpion reminds you that self-mastery is not about holding on to everything. It is about knowing what to let go of and how. There is a great deal of tension because the moon and the sun are in a tense conversation, a square, with Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio, so therefore he is the ruler of this full moon. This square is an aspect that immediately stands out when you look at the chart of this full moon, as if it creates a T-square triangle, and during this full moon Pluto is stationary, about to go retrograde on May 6 until October 16. So here his influence is very intense, very concentrated, and this tense T-square triangle highlights what needs to be released, what is no longer aligned, and also what holds you back in the past. It can be attachments, comfort zones, emotional dependencies, or even burdens you continue to carry unnecessarily. Pluto here demands, I would even say imposes, a profound and irreversible transformation. So obviously this can create inner tension. And the more you resist, the stronger the tension will be. I know we all have a part of us, that the conscious part that wants to evolve, and then there is another part, your subconscious part, that resists. Not because it is bad, but because it has been educated, trained, and conditioned to protect us. It is like survival mode. If I do this, I know that I can survive and that I can continue to exist. But if I change this routine, I don't know what might happen. So you see, this is typical of the fixed sign, Taurus, Scorpion, Leo, Aquarius. we cling on, even when we know it is time to let go. Of course, there can be a fear of the unknown. There can be stress, anxiety, restlessness, and that is normal, but very often it is not the unknown that is frightening. What is truly frightening is above all losing the familiar. But this full moon shows you precisely that you are no longer the same person. So here, with this T-square to Pluto, the moon is directly connected to a force that goes beyond your usual control. What surfaces can be raw, immediate, even confusing. It is not something you analyze calmly. It is something you feel deeply and sometimes unfiltered. And with Pluto in Aquarius, this intensity can also be linked to your place in a group, an organization, your community, a relationship, or a larger system, to how you assert yourself and how exposed you feel. There can be a feeling of tipping point, as if something within you can no longer be contained. But this T-square in fixed signs has a point of liberation that is opposite to Pluto in Aquarius, therefore positioned in Leo. So here, it is really about radiating and being in the simplicity and truth of who you are. It is an invitation to radical authenticity that demands you look squarely at who you are truly, what you truly want, what you can no longer keep silent about. This T-square brings an energy of truth. It is very demanding but profoundly liberating for those who accept to commit to it. Mars is in Aries, a sign he rules, but he is also the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Therefore, along Pluto, he is also the other ruler of this full moon and brings a very direct instinctive energy. Reactions can then be rapid, sometimes raw, as if what is felt immediately seeks expression. Mars in Aries is fully himself, direct, determined, and straightforward. And this creates a strong link between the energy of this full moon and a capacity for concrete action. So what this means is that the emotions that rise under this full moon in Scorpion are not at all destined to remain buried once again. They are seeking expression, a gesture, a movement towards something. Mars in Aries gives you the impetus to take this action. So this really speaks to you of movement. It is not about doing it hastily, but with a kind of quiet courage which consists of doing what you know to be right, even if it is difficult. In other words, saying what needs to be said, deciding what needs to be decided, and moving forward where you were still hesitating a little. In fact, it is about having the courage to take the right step. This Mars in Aries also forms a square with Jupiter in Cancer. We are dealing with a very primal energy here, a reaction that can erupt without going through the mind. With a square Mars-Jupiter, the emotion intensifies. The reaction can be stronger than expected. It can overflow, it can happen too fast, but at the same time, this overflow can also reveal something very true. This Mars-Jupiter square, in a way, forces you to a decision, and it asks you to question yourself. So what really matters to me right now? Is it action at all cost? Or what am I feeding by acting? These are questions that may not be very comfortable. And under the influence of this square, there may be a risk of overworking yourself, of promising too much, of wanting to go too fast or too hard. With Jupiter, the expansion and the motivation are there, but it is important not to exhaust yourself before reaching your destination. So dare to take the time to rest, to pause, to meditate. This is very important. In the background, we have Mercury in Aries, in near perfect conjunction with Chiron at 27 degrees, which was a degree of the new moon in Aries on the April 17. Is it a coincidence? But it definitely put a highlight on this conjunction. Mercury-Chiron energy is about healing and mental healing. Mercury is the mind and Chiron the wounded healer. Here Chiron is like the ferryman. It takes the suffering soul and shows it the way out of that hell, not by bypassing the pain, but by consciously traversing it. In fact, he allows the soul to regain its coherence, its integrity, so that it can finally shine fully. What you feel, what you understand, does not remain solely internal. There may be a need to put words to it, to express, to say something, but this expression is not neutral. It can touch something very sensitive within you. It can expose you, make you vulnerable. And that is precisely where it becomes interesting, because speaking here is not just communicating. It can be a step in the transformation process, as if putting things into words makes them even more real. So perhaps the story, a wound, an inner narrative could be revisited here, because Chiron invites you to rewrite your story from a space of healing, not to repeat the story of trauma, the story of the victim, the story of the wounds. No, it is to see it through another filter that is of healing, from the space of healing, so as not to carry the weight alone. And perhaps Chiron also invites you to consciously choose what you keep and what you let go of. So pay attention to what is being said around you, around this full moon. And be attentive to what you say to yourself, because the messenger Mercury is here. Aries is a sign of the first movement, that of I am, in its purest, more courageous form. The one that says, I exist, I have the right to be here, I take my place. And what Chiron offers here is a restoration of coherence through action, through initiative, through this inner or outer gesture, which consists of rising up for yourself. And therefore, any feeling of having been a victim can be transmuted under this full moon into sovereign strength. Aries is also here in close conjunction with Chiron, and Mercury sits between the two. Aries is a goddess of discord, a warrior of justice, who demands that every voice be heard, including the voices that have been silenced and excluded. And on the Venus side, which is the ruler of the Sun in Taurus, she's in Gemini, and she has several interesting conversations with other planets. Here with Venus in Gemini, there can be a kind of distance in relationships. Not necessarily cold, detached, but rather a need for perspective, to observe, to understand before getting involved. And in the context of this full moon in Scorpion, this distance takes on even more meaning, because the emotional intensity is strong. What is happening here is profound and sometimes confusing. And so this Gemini energy can act as a form of regulation, as a way of not letting yourself be completely absorbed by emotions. And Venus forms a trine to Pluto. So this distance becomes becomes very lucid. You can sense quite quickly, for example, if a connection has real depth. And so it changes the way you commit. There is less desire to stay where things don't go deep, even if the emotion is strong. And then we have the sextile between Venus in Gemini and Saturn in Aries, which brings more structure. Venus in Gemini yearns for exchange, new ideas, connection, writing, and enthusiastic sharing. And Saturn offers structure, a foundation, and direction. This sextile is truly a concrete support, which, if you choose to seize it, presents wonderful opportunities, new ideas emerging right now, new ways of loving, creating, and communicating. And Saturn helps them take shape. This sextile allows you to take a step back in relationships, aware of not getting swept away solely by the movement or the intensity, and of making clearer choices in how you commit. As if amidst everything that is going on, you could recognize what truly deserves your attention and what you consciously choose to build. This Venus-Saturn sextile is not an explosive energy. It is a constructive energy. It is a great point of stability in a sky that is otherwise, as you can see, very intense. Also note that Venus enters Gemini at the same time as Uranus on the 25-26 of April, which is remarkable. Uranus-Venus together in Gemini speaks to us of openness to the unexpected in our relationships, of a new and sometimes surprising way of connecting with others. Uranus definitely enters Gemini 5 days before this full moon, and he will remain there until 2033. Uranus in Gemini represents a profound restructuring of our modes of communication, thought, and information. His speed, the unpredictable, the genius of disruption applies to everything related to our exchanges, our networks, our way of transmitting and receiving. It can bring disruptions to transportation, digital communication, and information systems. It can also bring sudden awakenings, new ways of thinking about the world, or a lucidity that cuts like a sword. And in the context of this full moon in Scorpion, this Uranus in Gemini creates a very strong contrast. On one hand, there is a deep, almost visceral emotion intensity, and on the other, there is an energy that seeks to move quickly, to understand, to connect, to change perspectives. So be gentle with yourself these days. Be present to what is rising, what is being revealed, and trust your inner self, which already knows where to go. And in the background of this full moon, there is also Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries. It is an aspect we already know, but which remains active. It speaks of a mixture between ideal and reality, between illusion and the concrete. And here, in this very intense climate, it can pose a rather simple question. What are you actually doing with what you feel? During this full moon, we have a strong activation of the water signs, with the moon in Scorpion, in trine to Jupiter in Cancer, and in trine to the North Node in Pisces, the North Node being the path of destiny. And this water triangle amplifies the need for emotional security and the notion of trust. Can I trust? But in fact, underneath the real question is, can I trust myself? Do I have confidence in myself, in my resources, in my ability to transform myself? Do I have faith in myself, faith in my life? But most of all, do I feel supported? And speaking of support, we have significant support at this full moon, with Saturn and Neptune in Aries forming a sextile with Pluto in Aquarius and another sextile to Uranus in Gemini. Between these four slow-moving planets, a beautiful pattern is created, a minor trine. And this pattern is now stable until 2028. It is a rare configuration that outlines the architecture of a new era. This minor trine means that despite the tensions, new beginnings are supported. This pattern represents a very profound collective transformation impulse. So there are forces of renewal descending precisely from the moment when this minor trine is completed, that is at this full moon time. This tells us something important. We are at a threshold, not a dramatic one, but an immense threshold of true beginnings, those that makes no noise but that change everything. So I invite you to welcome these forces with an open heart, in the most open consciousness you can find within yourself. Since the new moon in Aries on April 17, a new cycle has begun, and this full moon in Scorpion, in a way, with her strong element of water, is cleansing what is preventing this new beginning from fully taking shape. So during this full moon time, set clear boundaries. It is one of the best responses to this intense Plutonian energy. Saying no, deciding to no longer tolerate something. It is as if it is time to tell the universe, well, I am ready for something new, something better. And so, if a door closes during this full moon time, if something ends, if something is taken from you, try not to remain fixed on the closed door. Your soul already knows what awaits on the other side. It has gone before you there. And that remains, all that remains is for you to go and to work through the fears that resurface. And move your body as well. Dance, because emotion is energy in motion, which needs to move in order to transform. In conclusion, this full moon at the beginning of May is truly a full moon of truth. And in Scorpion, she evokes a notion of purging, a profound emotional liberation. There is a good chance that you will feel intensity, but also afterwards, a great clarity, really like a major emotional stress passing. But a few hours after this full moon, the moon will form a trine with Jupiter in Cancer. And this will bring about calm, expansion, a kind of openness, as if you needed to get through this period of purging, of emotional crisis, in order to move towards something greater and more. It can be profoundly transformative, so pay close attention to what is happening within you during this time. Remember that this full moon is an invitation to trust in this famous new chapter, which we have been talking about for a while now. And also remember, we are in 2026, year one, the year of the fire horse. We have just crossed the energetical portal of Aries, and this truly marks a profound renewal. So trust this process. Go through the necessary purging to clear the decks. Of course, this might not be easy, not pleasant, but with Scorpion, it is not about ease, it is about truth. Something is being released, allowing you to move forward lighter, more aligned, and more conscious. So experience this full moon in Scorpion as a return to yourself. Give yourself time to breathe, to write, to meditate, to listen to music, to paint, to create art, to dance. It is truly a moment of solitude, but a virtuous solitude. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please leave a comment about your experience. And if this video resonated with you, you can support it with a like and share it to fuel my desire to continue exploring the lunar cycles with you. I wish you a very beautiful full moon. May we all walk the path of our hearts with love and light.